colleagues, John, Russell, and Emil. What I would like you to do, right at the beginning, no, he's fine, is to think of yourselves for a moment, our starting slide, to think of one of your students in one of your classes when you're getting maybe a little bit tedious, and you see the student sort of looking at their watch carefully, right? Doesn't happen to many of you, but it certainly happens in my classes. And what you're looking for would be this app. I mean, here's a typical student's watch nowadays with a typical student's selection of apps, and the key is to the app that we're going to talk about this morning. It doesn't exist. So, this is just to note who we are. This is the 3RsApp. So what does it stand for? It stands for, as you can not be surprised, recruitment, retention, and re-entry, the app for this. Do you want to click? Because I'm over here. Not click. You've only got to click. This is what the students object to, the fact that they have to have a mouse and click. I don't know if you find that. Problem is, yeah. So what we've done is to look at the problems in each of the areas, and very briefly I will go through them and share them with John. We're on college. We need to go back. Where are we? I went forward. Somehow we really wrote. I'm not very good with French. No, I just... Mon français, c'est terrible. Toujours, je demande qu'est-ce que le mot français pour. But now I need to know qu'est-ce que le instruction en français pour. We still go back, left-hand grade. Apparently oh, okay. Where are we? We're going... I'm sure you're happy. Where do you start? This is following the new intention that Matthew was describing, that you need, you need to get through the whole process as quickly as possible to satisfy the customer. Well, we try again. Which button do you press, the left one or the right one?
For the mouse, there's only one.
Only one. Sorry?
There's arrows on the keyboard.
Well, I'm here. So this will just one that goes forward.
It just goes forward.
Okay, I shall be very careful. Okay, where are we? Right. We're at the beginning. As I say, recruiting, retention, re-entry. Now, what we've done is to look and see what's happening, and most of our attention is focused on the States, although we have some Europe contributions from Emil and John. We've been looking at this. In the United States, the trend has been for the costs are going up. The costs that are going up, and I'm sure you'll all agree with this, are mainly the costs of administration. The salaries of the faculty have not been going up at anything like the pace of the fees going up or the costs of the administration going up. There's plenty of evidence of that. What is happening then is, as the tuition rates go up, 30,000 to 40,000 to 50,000 a year, then at the same time the percent of discount has been going up too, so that when they increase the fees, they know they're not going to get all of them, so they increase the discount that's being provided. The average in the United States apparently at the moment is in the region of 42%. So if you see a school with 60,000 and you can immediately mentally calculate 40% of 60,000, you know that most people are paying only, the discount's going to be 24,000, they're going to pay the 36. That's what's going on, and it's a sort of very interesting situation, because you know that's the average, and of course what you're looking for as an American university is all those foreign students who will come and pay the full amount, right? Because then And that's really a seriously recruiting thing, which is unfortunate. And so that also makes recruiting tough because most of the American fees are very significantly higher than fees in the rest of the world. So there's tuition discounting. There's an enormous trend to online education in the United States. Over 70% of students will be either directly online or in a hybrid situation. In other words, their classes will have a lot of online. And that is a problem because, again, it enables students not to go through the traditional four-year program. And in the United States at the moment, we are in a time when the number of students graduating from high schools is slightly down. It goes through cycles, as I'm sure it does in other countries. So, first set of problems. Second set is that the persistence of students in the first year, that is their willingness to stay, it's very much less than 90%. Many schools will have a retention from the first year to the second year of less than 70%. And so what you have to think about then is the next problem, that you lose 3 years of income every time you lose a student in the first year, effectively, particularly if you're doing any sort of planning. At the moment, 40%, it's a very high percentage if you think about it, of college and graduate students are re-entries. They have had some education, gone off, and then come back. And the main reason for this, of course, is the high fees. So very typically, students will go to something like a community college, which is very inexpensive. They will get their technical skills in Microsoft and so on. They now are able to get a job at one of the big stores like Best Buy. They will then work at Best Buy and do maybe some part-time or maybe not. They'll accumulate enough money so that when they go back to school, with any luck, they will be hired by a university that is desperately short of computer-competent people. So they now go in and they're getting their degree free, but being paid very lowly to be the IT people at the company. The problem with that, of course, is as soon as they get their degree, they're off to one of the major companies because there's also a desperate shortage of IT competent people in the United States. In Finley at the moment, we have an unemployment rate of about 2-point-something%. Nationwide, it's about 4%, 4.6, I think, percent in the United States. We have far more jobs in our local area than we have students or other people to fill them. It's a very difficult situation. So that's the 40%. These are the associates wanting promotion and the community graduates who have had time to get funds to come back, because as far as possible, no student wants to move into the market with, well, you think about it, 4 years at $30,000, $120,000 of debt. It's going to take, particularly with the short-term focus of a student, it's going to take an awful long time to pay off. So that becomes a problem. So we now have to look, I think, at the millennial and the iGen. That's to say, the millennial student, which is kind of almost through college now, and the iGen student coming on. Now remember, these people have not heard of Enron. They've grown up with the internet. It's been there, like air and water. They've got smartphones because most of them have even grown up with a smartphone. They've got iPads, many of them, or the equivalent. I mean, Surface or whatever it is, all the other equipment. And when they do their research, there is a high tendency simply to look at the first page of any search engine they go to, and the reason for that is it's just one touch. It isn't click. It's and I think we're seeing a generation, probably my grandchildren, who will never understand what, this business of click. They'll say, "What was that?" It will be something in the past. Like picking up your telephone and blowing on it. I don't know if any of you remember that. You remember that? Yes. Well, what? Yeah. Well, no, just not on the ship. No. In the early days of telephone, all the local lands were on there. You had to blow to get your little flicker to Yeah, oh yes. So, what are the trends in recruiting, given that situation? Terribly mobile. We're moving more and more into the app for recruiting, just for recruiting, so that the student can get some sort of app which maybe leads them automatically to the website. Then they've got to go on and, unless the website is touchscreen, which some of them are beginning to be, you have really to attract the student. If the person who's doing the recruiting is not terribly mobile, they're not going to get them. Colleges therefore have apps of various different times, but again, remember, these apps are solely for recruiting. And this is, I think, very important. They don't go very far. They take you to the website. They may give you some other item which the recruiter has thought is quite useful for you. You may be able to get a tour of the university, a virtual tour. The big thing is, let's make it a really positive experience. So when you're recruiting, obviously you're very full of energy and it's very exciting, and our university's got the biggest swimming pool and the best football team and everything else. Don't get too worried about the education. It's a fantastic place to be and all that sort of thing. Very positive. And there's a lot of very interesting academic material which tells you how to be really positive, which is quite frightening, really. And then the programmatic advertising, where more and more the universities are trying to say they have a very special program which is particularly designed for data analytics, big data, all sorts of different names for some of these programs, and they think up a really nice name and they call it a special program, and if you come, and then they're also linking some programmatic advertising so that people can do their 4-year degree in 3 years, and this sort of material. Anything to be a little bit more exciting, if you like. There's been a lot of analysis in the United States which suggests that American students want to have some sort of social responsibility. So many universities will have opportunities to go, I don't know, to South America and paint houses for poor people, that sort of thing. And there's a lot of that going on. The Deloitte has done a very interesting analysis because they're looking for future accountants, and they're looking at how will students buy into their university, because they want they're looking for lots and lots of very cheap interns, and the cheap interns come in the second, third year, and if they're very good, they'll hold them into the 4th year and then take them on. So they're looking, how are universities getting their future students to buy into the university and therefore stay? So that's linking to some extent with the retention. It's an early look at retention. Then the whole sorts of data analytics are looking at the algorithmic fit of students in your university. And I'm sure you're all aware of this, where the universities get from SAT and other sources, they buy a large number of student addresses and so forth, and then put them into a funnel. And the idea is we have this number, we know the number who, if we send out 10,000 invitations to the university, a percentage, maybe 5,000, will respond and ask for more details. Maybe 2,000 will then actually come and visit the university, and then maybe 1,000 will actually register, and of those 1,000, maybe 900 will come. And that's all done in data analytics, as you would say, and it's just a question of how many you're going to start with, because they're quite expensive, as you can imagine, and then you follow those through. So a great deal of looking at the fit. Now, the problem with that is that you don't know the fit of your current student body, really, because you know what the fit was when they came in. You don't know how they've changed terribly. So a lot of the analysis is based on data which is changing, because students do change, I mean, like most of us. And then we're in the business world, particularly for MBA, there's an awful lot of marketing in all the business journals and that sort of thing, and trying to get articles about how good your school is in these various publications. Looking at retention, again, there is a whole series of academic literature on benchmarks, by benchmarks on best practices. These are the sort of things that you do with your computer analysis if you've got it. You look at the courses where there are a high rate of withdrawals and you find out why. You look at the student course assessments, not necessarily looking at what they say about the professor, but looking at what they say about the whole course and picking up the negatives and trying to improve on those. The learning management system progress monitor, most of us, I'm sure, now have learning management systems. As we'll see, I hope, they're really not properly focused, and you need to have a progress monitor to see how many times people are using it and so forth. And then obviously tracking the courses that students are taking so that you get a much better idea of the progress through over a 4-year period. And then identifying, big problem with many universities is that if you have a relatively wide range of majors, then a student wants to take a course in their 3rd year and they want to take it, and at that particular time that they are available, there's a conflict with another course, and that needs to be much better managed because it's very costly. So, the retention trends. There's a huge focus. Nutt talks about a change focus, where we've got to look at how we're holding on to students, if you like, and find the additional features that we need to do. And the real problem has been that most of the retention has looked to the academic advisor. And most of the research indicates that may not even be 30% of the problem. They may like their academic advisor and still leave. So that's a question. Some of the influences are the social connectedness. Are they alone? And this is a generation that tends to be rather introverted. They tend to come from a home where they've always been looked after, and they come onto a campus where they're supposed to be looking after themselves, but the learning process is quite difficult. And I don't mean in terms of going into a class and learning in a class, because they've done that in high school, but learning to be the fact that mum and dad are not there when you get back from your classes, that sort of problem. The approachability. You're seeing a lot, I think, in the newspapers about the gender discrimination, for want of a better word, in social activity in the United States, Weinstein and co. Well, this is also a major problem at university, because growing up for 18 years in a nice family atmosphere, and they suddenly are exposed to interaction, particularly, of course, between male and female, they don't know how to do it. They have not had much experience. Yes, they've been through high schools, but the high schools, remember, are fairly carefully watched, and high school starts when you leave home and go to high school, and finishes when you leave high school and go home. So you don't have that quite the same problem. The administrative procedures at the university, where, for example, if I have to pay my bill, I have to walk half a mile to wherever the finance place is, or where I can't just go to my watch and go bang and hit it and pay for whatever's to be paid for, or do whatever's to be done on my watch. No, it's going to take half an hour, and I may have to wait for the person and all that sort of thing. Very inconvenient, especially to students who are not used to it. The non-traditional learning experiences which they have again to be looked at, because what you consider as a faculty member as a traditional experience, or as an administrator particularly as a traditional experience at university, the millennials and particularly the iGen don't understand as being traditional. And then the student support services with students who have been so well nurtured, if you like, at home, and who have been, you could get anything on their iPad or their tablet, then how, when they come to the university, what do they do? If you're not careful, they'll sit down with their tablet and wonder what they're going to do next. Maybe they'll get to the next class if you're lucky, but they may be, if there's no support. So you need an active, and I mean very active program, which is going to the students and basically making sure that they are being supported without irritating them. Quite a problem. So re-entry, enormous growth in adult student population. We mentioned 40%, something like that. The idea of the American college being a 4-year program is a complete myth. Very few students get through a 4-year program, except possibly there's a reasonably high percentage in the small private colleges, because that's what they're totally focused on. But if you think of something like the Ohio State University, the average student takes between 5 and 6 years. And that's the same for the main universities. Re-entry tends, the 4-year plus programs, these are programs which take account portfolio, experience and so forth, and so they can cut the amount of time that somebody's student's going to go back to university in order to get them a degree. A lot of special arrangements to try and speed up the process, because if we can get you through from your 2-year degree to your final degree in a year, obviously that's more attractive. And so there are a lot of programs like that. And then the enormous growth of online, because online, it isn't quite yet becoming cheaper than bricks and mortar, but there is a trend, we're beginning to see it. And we're beginning to see the fact that if you take off the cost of your swimming pool and your football team, and your dormitories and everything else, the cost of the actual academic is almost certainly less than 50%. It's probably around about 35%. And if you then reduce your fees to that element, you're going to be very marketable. As one of the colleges in Washington, taking advantage of its location, has a professional MBA, which is $5,000 a semester. So again, to get your MBA for $10,000 is incredibly cheap by current American standards. So what are we going to do about it? That's the question. And facing us is the app. So what do we need to do? We need a conceptual framework. John, have we got that? We've got a conceptual framework on paper, which we're going to hand out very quickly. Oh. Have I got one? Oh. Yes, but they need one. Oh. It's interesting, if you're doing an academic paper, presenting detail is really quite difficult. And so what we've done is to provide you with a conceptual analysis. It can't be described as much more than that. A major multinational in Europe, and I was the controller. And the key to our success was that as we acquired companies, we immediately put them onto our accounting system. Simple as that. That would always result very quickly in loss-making companies which we'd acquired making profits, because that's what we'd focused on. How did we know? Our system, our accounting system, if you like, was focused entirely on the product. And this is the key point. This was an engineering company. We knew how to make cylinders. When I was asked to be European controller, the first thing I was told is, remember, you are administration. You do nothing for the product. You provide the data and the information which enables the product producers to make good decisions. So the key was a total focus on the product that we were producing. And so our ERP system, everybody knows, you know, the enterprise resource planning system, the enterprise was the key, and the enterprise was the product, because the enterprise was selling goods. As far as I can see in the United States at the moment from my research, no university, not a single university in the United States, Waldron is getting very close, focuses on the student. And so what we have done, and the theme to this year's conference has indicated, is we've separated out, and I've got them on this dial that you've got, we've separated out recruitment, retention, and re-entry. But they're all the same, because they're all focused on the student. And so if we're going to put in an ERP system, it has to start with the app. And that's why we called our presentation the 3RsApp. Because what the app has got to do, I've got only got two hands, it's unfortunate. Well, what you're seeing here, I hope, is that what we're looking at is the process of the student going through to graduation, or not quite to graduation, and having to re-enter. And the focus here is always on the student. So right from the start, we are enabling the student when we recruit. For example, I'm just going to give you some examples, I think, rather than trying to tie that all together. John will help me and we'll put these together. I'm out recruiting a student. First of all, I'm giving him a free app. How many people have had free apps, right? You know, you want to go into a hotel, you get hotels.com or whatever it is, right? You give them a free app which takes them to the university, right? They are now automatically, I mean, you load it for them, but you've now got their name, address, and all that data for communication. They now have access to the university, and in your recruiting you show them this is what we do at the university, and on that shows them, you could say, first question maybe, or one of the early questions is, what sort of major are you thinking about? And the person says, oh, I'm thinking about being I don't know, a biology major. And you say, okay, well now, see that app, press that one, and that will give you the 4-year plan of a biology major. And what do you think of that? Well, what happens if I didn't want to do this? Well, just press that course that you don't like the look of, all right, and see what the alternatives are. You're gathering me. I'm not going to go on with this because it's fairly clear. Now, when the person, of course, presses the course, they can also press a button which tells them the materials, in other words, the e-book and everything else that goes with it is automatically loaded up. Now, that's already happening in HCT, right?
Yeah, but not to the degree that you described.
No, I know, but it's already happening. What I'm saying is we already have the ability to do this. The problem is we have administrations at universities who have no real-world experience, and so they don't understand that when you hire an ERP system, when you buy in an ERP system, it's supposed to be running your enterprise. They think it's supposed to be running your administration, your finance. No. What I learned right from the start was the proprietary software which we were working on in the 70s and 80s was focused entirely on the product. So we made a change in the product. We should be able to automatically see online change in the price because we have standard costing and so on. A customer we could see in the newspapers went broke. Okay, we could immediately tell, well, within a few minutes, unfortunately we were still on mouse clicks. Nowadays it's got to be taps, right? Touchscreen activities, we would see how much of an impact this would be, not only on our sales, but on our salesmen, on our region, and everything else. So we'd know exactly where either to try and make up, and so on. Same should be the case with a student. Student gets a F or gets a grade outside the plan, because we're going to go and plan with the student, right? Then you have an ability to note that straight away. And the person who will note it will be the appropriate person, depending on the nature of the problem that students entered in their plan. So we're looking at providing forecasts so which we can see the actual, not just of what they do in class, but of all the other areas that we think are important for their education. It's pretty complex when you think about it. But items like their class scores, they should be able to access as soon as the professor has put it in. Now, if you go to Blackboard and some of the advanced forms of Blackboard, that's possible. I know when I'm grading on one online course, I put the grade in and I have to put in my responses to the grade at the same time. It's not very difficult. I mean, I've got a sort of standardized form, I fill it in, click and send it in. One of the things I may find is within minutes, I may have a question from one of the people who I've graded. Good, that's providing the approachability and the relationship and so forth. Think about it if we now have those students coming in and we cohort them. So we have business majors and we know that their first 2-year program is going to be this. Right? That means we can, if we know the first 2-year program, we can project the 3rd and 4th year pretty accurately. So we now have a strategic planning mechanism which every university would love, which they could look and say in year 4, when these students graduate, we're just starting with, we will need in the intervening time to get 2 extra staff in this and 1 extra staff in that, right? Do we have enough classrooms? We don't wait until we're preparing for the year. We will know, hopefully 3 years ahead, of if we've got enough classroom space, depending on whether things are going up and down. We have a whole planning system which American companies have, well, major American companies have. We don't have a wish list. I haven't yet come across, I haven't come across in a university that actually has a strategic plan. I've only come across universities that have wish lists. And the difference, of course, is with your wish list, you don't tie it directly into the financials. If you're going to have a strategic plan, the financials are essential because you have to know what's going to happen in year 4 so you can finance it. And so the whole, I'm just giving you the conceptual framework. John? What? Oh, yeah. I think the next one. So, this is the input priority. Do you want to?
Is this working? Can you hear me? I guess the fundamental point for us here is not just the technology that the students today are familiar with. It's not just the technology, but that you need to change within the organization, the administration, and in particular, we could say academic and student affairs, that the student affairs and the academic affairs should be one. But equally, when we see this, when we talk about this, we're also well aware from the literature and maybe from our own experience that the people who are involved in academic affairs and the people who are involved in student affairs are very different types of people, very different status maybe. And so if you're able to break down the silo, for example, between student affairs and academic affairs, it will require some changing cultures on by both parties, by the academics and by the administrators.
No, that's what you're saying. So we're making it a one-stop shop. You're making a product, that's it. I mean, if you think in a big major company that's, in our case, we were making cylinders and somewhat of a range of engineering associated with cylinders. What was important was what did the customer think about the product? And so we were constantly going to the customer and saying, how can we improve the product? What do you want, etc. A lot of that going on all the time with every customer. And we don't do that with students. So what we need is be focused on the students. As you said, it's a one-stop shop. The student has one app, and that app takes them everywhere that they need to go in a very short time because it's an app. There's no disciplinary silos. They've got to go. We can't have people teaching liberal arts, teaching philosophy, and suggesting that that's totally separate from business. Business is the liberal art. Business incorporates every one of the liberal arts. They're very important. But we don't for a moment emphasize history when we're teaching business. Why? Well, because that's done by history, and you better not get into that area. But the history of business is incredibly important for particular businesses, just to know what's happened in the past and so forth, and to get the students thinking like that. Because if you're on a project, one of the things you need to do is to go back and see some of the other projects and see whether they went well or they went badly and find out why. Then you'll better manage the newer product. And then the co-production of the learning experience. This is a document where the student gets together with relative, people who they want to get together, and they put together their learning experience. Again, we talked about buy-in. Now the students bought into it. If the students design the program, just like in a major multinational, if the department manager has signed off on the budget, the department manager wants to make that budget. If, on the other hand, somebody at the top has said, oh, this is your budget, they're not really interested. It's very important, that buy-in position.
Okay, can we just address the co-production? I think we both feel very uneasy with the notion of student as customer and consumer. And there's literature in the institutional field talking about co-production, and suggesting that co-production, the students have to take part in the learning. They're not here just to suck something from the professors, right? It's a two-way affair. And so we're suggesting here with the co-production that the students can be involved even in an advisory capacity, maybe initially with the scheduling, which courses are offered, when they're offered. Not like for me, I like 8 a.m. classes, I'm having my classes at 8 a.m. What would suit the student experience? That's the general idea here. And certainly co-production rather than a consumer.
No, yeah, absolutely. And I just said, I think we've outlined the concept, the idea of a single app for the student, and the focus, most important, the focus on the student, not on the administration, not on, I mean, when we're doing accreditation, and too often we focus on, not always on the student. More and more the accreditation, be careful because Emil will be after me for this, but more and more there is a bit of an emphasis on the student. But if we are to really get hold of what's going on at the universities and really want to save money, because all I know from my experience with a big American company is when you have this information and you make use of it, every time we acquired a company, we saved at least 9% without doing anything. We didn't have to go in and change anybody or anything else. We just gave them the information that came from the system and let them work, and very quickly, at least 9% actually to be accurate, was being saved. And then after that, of course, there was further saving to come. And this would be true in the universities. An incredible waste of money and time by the administration. So what we're saying, which we might, I hope we might discuss a bit, certainly after, when as we're networking, as they call it, the 4-year plan. Heidelberg College, for example, has been using one for, well, certainly since 1980. They put the whole plan of the student on an Excel so you can change it fairly easily, but it's not on an app. It's something the student gets. And there are several other universities who do that. Walden, as somebody has mentioned, is doing that very too. The e-links to the student, so that you email and that sort of thing is fine as long as the student has the smartwatch and gets the information. The distinction between text and email is the difference is being lost. The assignments, the maps, the locations, and everything else that goes on to the university, I don't know how many of you, I'm only at a university with about 4,000 students. Finding out what's going on is really quite difficult. You go to the calendar, you don't see the date. You go to the department secretary and ask about a particular one that you know about, and she said, oh, I've heard about that, it might be, and she rings another department secretary that she thinks appropriate, and they, oh yes, it's tomorrow or something else. But you don't have the dates. Very few universities have a competent, complete calendar. Obviously this would come out of it. The actual college calendar, as I mentioned, the assignments, the maps, the locations that are needed, how do you get from one building to the other? Can you just press the button, look at the map and walk it with a sort of almost with a GPS? Why not? It's very easy. The technology is all there. The student finances, do we want them moving around all the time, or is that all, most of them have their bank account and everything else on their watch or their tablet? Again, that should be there. And then all the details of their residence and their food and how that's provided, all should be, in effect, in one place. They don't have to, so that it's managed here. And I would suppose from an academic I should say, and that, think of that, if it's all on one app, look at the opportunity to sit and critically think about everything. And what do we want more and more in the entrepreneurial world? We want the people who critically think about what's going on now and have the ideas which enable them to do very well in business entrepreneurially. I think of my example, which I often use in class, of Harry's Razors. I don't know if anybody's heard of Harry's Razors. Has anybody heard of Harry's Razors? It's a 6 million customer operation that has taken on Gillette. You've probably heard of Gillette. And they are producing a razor which is significantly less than half the price of a Gillette razor, and they have a scheme whereby they send you in a packet every month, I think it is, 1 blade or 2 blades or whatever you require, and the cost of those blades is less than $1 each if you're in the program. Whereas if you go to Gillette, you're going to pay $3 to $5 depending on where you are. But what I'm saying is the opportunity to get in and start providing us with the entrepreneurial experience, which we will then see. So I think I've probably gone way over time, for which I apologize. I hope it was interesting. I believe that this is coming. I think there are people working on it. Sorry? Yes? Yes, there are definitely people working on it. Good, that's good to hear. I put this together because I was so fed up with seeing what our university IT department was doing. They had a silo for the learning management system, a silo for of the accreditation stuff, a silo for the finance, a silo for the administration, and a silo for programs. And I'm thinking, why don't you put them together? And why don't you link the student to it? Because that's what's bringing in the money. And as you say, thank you for that. I'm glad to hear that I'm sure it's going, because I've seen it at Walden, and to some extent Phoenix has it, but it's developing. And I would encourage you all to think that way, and I think we will see an enormous improvement then in the quality of students that we produce. Thanks very much.